Welcome back to the MHS channel. First, I'm very curious to know where you're watching from and at what time. Feel free to share in the comments below. Also, if you have any feedback or suggestions for how the channel can improve, don't hesitate to leave a comment. My name's Steven, 30 years old. I'm an architect. Together, me and my wife, Marie, had been married for a year now. Our courting time was rather short, yet both of us seemed to synchronize our zing very well. Marie's 5 years my junior, and she was very youthful for her age. She's a chief advisor for a financial firm. However tough she might seem to be, she's really in love with her inner child. Her cup of tea was everything that appeared to be cute or fluffy, or both. Teddy bears, cute decorative stickers, to name a few. Sometimes I thought I was even less important than those she deemed little angels. But I was deep in love with her personality and self, so it didn't matter that much. I even designed a single room dedicated to her unyielding passion of putting the cute things on display. I might likely have to redesign a bigger room, or maybe even purchase another estate due to her growing passion. At our 1-year anniversary, I brought a special gift for her. I was pretty sure she's gonna love it. Looking at her excitedly opening up the gift box filled me with a sense of pride and happiness. It was a wooden puppet in the shape of a joker, a clown. Marie held the puppet in hands, excited since she never had any puppets within her collection. She kissed me, then looking attentively at the gift. She even mimicked the voice of a clown in thanking me. I spent quite a lot on that gift, but it didn't matter much, as long as she's happy with it. We enjoyed a cozy and modest anniversary at home. The next day, Marie told me that she wanted to exhibit the puppet in the living room. I want to put it in a glass box so everyone will see it on the way in. Today was the day we're having some family friends coming by and a small party. Because it's the big day, so I arranged it to her wish. I left the puppet there among the table with the statues. That evening, we made a feast for the guests. Our guests were our mutual friends, Joseph, Sandra, Emily, and Robert. We feasted and talked way into the evening. Everyone was pretty excited about the puppet I gifted Marie, except Emily, who's sitting on edge the entire time. Emily was an amateur psychic, and so she knew a thing or two about the supernatural. "Dudes, come look at the eyes and smirk of this puppet," she said. "It's super creepy, like this thing was cursed or something." Her words froze everyone on their conversation, especially about the gift I bought for my wife. Moreover, it was old now. "I'm not so sure, but it reeks of negative energies. It might harm you, or at least indirectly affect your well-being and happiness." The dinner's atmosphere seemed to have sunken down after her saying. I knew clearly that it was Emily's concern for us and Marie to say so, but Marie seemed to have flustered after the few words. "You're overreacting, Emily." Marie said it straight. "Thank you for your concern, but I don't want you to poke your nose into our well-being." Marie's careless wording had really struck one of Emily's nerves. The other friends and I had managed our best to keep the intense atmosphere in check. But I didn't get it, why Marie was acting weird like that. Her regular self wasn't there that day. She spat out some of the most venomous words that slowly eroded away Emily's patience. Then the two broke into a quarrel. It surprised me the most that my wife would resort to using the high-pitched voice of the clown to evoke anger within their quarrel. At that moment, I had no other choice but to step in, dragging my wife back to her room before returning to my friends. I apologized to Emily, reasoning that maybe it was the many shots of drinks that led her to act that way. But everyone was visibly upset, especially Emily. She swore that it would be the last time she even set foot inside my home, ever. Carrying a huge burden within my chest, I came back to my room with a heavy heart. Marie had slept already. Her breath full of anger fueled alcohol. After changing her sweat-soaked clothes, I sat down with many thoughts. However, the fatigue overcame it, and I fell asleep. The next morning when I woke up, Marie was nowhere to be found. Even when I barged down to the living room, Marie and the puppet were nowhere in sight. I called out for her in fear, and to my relief, Marie's voice rang back from the dining room, joyously. I went over to see a neatly made feast prepared for my sake. Marie was in a very good mood today, and seeing her like this was a huge relief. I went in and hugged her tightly, and the two of us sat down at our dining table. The sight of the puppet sitting directly opposite me startled me. It wasn't until now that I could take a closer look at it. Its two eyes, wide open, gazed directly at me. Its creepy, uncannily human stare. "Why is the puppet here?" I asked Marie. "From this point forward, this puppet will be a part of our family, hun," Marie joyfully answered. Her answer was a true surprise, even for me. It was until then that I realized the puppet had the same food tray as mine, with almost identical portions. I stayed silent at the sight. To be honest, it's more like I was speechless. In stark contrast with my wife's bubbling happiness, I wasn't able to eat much. There's a bitter lump slowly rising in my throat. After breakfast, I got changed for work and was told from my wife that she's working from home today. It was kinda late, so I didn't ask a lot of questions. Before leaving, I waved at her through the window, seeing her holding the puppet with her. I suddenly got a creepy feeling. For a few seconds, her smile was kinda like the puppet itself. It was a tough day at work mentally for me. I was torn between trying to make up with Emily and was distracted by that damn puppet. It just went around and around in my head. When I came back home, I didn't see Marie come to greet me. Both the living room and kitchen were empty. That puppet was nowhere to be seen as well. When I came to my room, I was startled with the clown turning back on me. "Hey, who are you, and where's my wife?" I raised my voice. Only silence answered me. "If you don't respond, I'll call the police." I came closer, raising my voice. Surprised? Suddenly, that clown swiftly jumped into me. It was Marie, answering with a clowny voice that was of my wife, dressing up like the puppet I gifted her. She made some lame jokes, despite my protesting voice and facial expression. It was as if she's not there, or didn't care about it. I held her tightly by the shoulders, beaming my stern gaze into her. "Honey, this prank's getting old. I do not like this at all." She still maintained that lame joke, as if she deliberately not understanding what I was trying to say. I grumbled and gritted my teeth. It was then that Marie turned back to her normal self, claiming it was all just a joke, that I was overreacting. I nodded, agreeing with her statement. The atmosphere slowly returned to normal, to the point that I was calm enough to ask her to go downstairs for dinner. Except the fact that the puppet was still eyeballing me. Everything was pretty okay. But I didn't like that at all, especially when she's putting the puppet in between us during mealtime. In hindsight, I had no idea why I was so calm back then to put up with this. When we went to bed, I turned my back toward Marie and fell into an exhaustion-driven sleep quickly. A creepy chuckle jolted me off my sleep in the middle of the night. It took some time for me to get whose that chuckler was. By then I was completely drenched in sweat looking around. It was Marie, staring into the mirror, twisting and turning her head, mimicking the laughter of the puppet. There seemed to be some clicking sounds coming from my right side, prompting me to look there. It was the goddamn puppet, moving on its own. When I yelped at my wife, she swiftly turned her head to me, which again filled me with dread. She had somehow put on a clown makeup identical to that puppet. She burst into laughter, gazing at me with white rolling eyes. I snapped completely and turned around. Marie was hugging that puppet really tight in her sleep. That puppet's face was something completely out of this world. That's it. I had enough. I thought to myself, then grabbing the pillow into the couch. For the entire night huddling around the sofa, I couldn't sleep at all. Any sound would jolt me wide awake. The next morning I got up exhausted, tortured by a nasty migraine. I tried calling Emily to let her know that I believed her on the puppet affairs, but she didn't pick up the phone, likely still very mad about what happened last time. I groggily brought the glass box away to the storage. Then I'd go to wake up Marie in our room later. I had to get rid of that damn puppet. More and more, Emily's words started to make more sense. I wasn't sure whether Marie's sudden changes had anything to do with it or not, but I was sure that this puppet haunting face would cause me more nightmares to come. But as soon as I got to the stairs leading to the bedroom, that puppet was there, moving on its own. Behind it was hundreds upon hundreds of my wife's collections, staring at me, having the identical creepy smile. Then they all came at me, knocked me off the stairs. I fell hard on the ground, hitting my head. The sensation of pain struck me hard, jolted me up from my bed. What just happened? Was it all a dream? I mumbled aloud, seeing Marie turning her back on me, seemingly asleep. I was surprised, knowing that I just leaned my head and slept upon the puppet. I shook Marie to wake her up to no avail. When I turned her body around, I was too stunned to move. She was there, stiff as a log, and her beautiful face got a deep scar to mimic on the puppet's creepy smile. I yelled out and furiously smashed that puppet with all my strength before immediately took Marie to the ER. For now, Marie's in much better shape, yet it's still many months of psychiatric treatment before she completely recovered. I almost have lost her, yet I am still unsure whether that accursed puppet had a hand in this or not, as Emily had stated it earlier. I'm Rose, 26 years old. I'm having a rather happy life, getting married soon to my beloved fiancé and a stable job. I have a brother, 3 years my junior, Beavis. We had an unhappy childhood, separating from one another, with me going through foster homes, while Beavis was hospitalized in a psychiatric ward. 16 years ago, I had a happy family with my parents and my little brother. Thanks to our father's flourishing business, we lived in a large and cozy household. My mom was a wonderful woman. She was just perfect, and for the three of us, she's our world. Her lifelong passion was arts. She loved collecting the objects that carried with it some resemblance of antiquity. I remembered on my mother's birthday, my dad went home with a bundle of flowers and a carefully covered gift for such special occasion. It was rather large and wrapped in a luxurious silk canvas, requiring 2 people to carry, and it was an antique mirror stand. My mom was in love with that gift already. She was so ecstatic that she came over and repeatedly kissed my dad, despite our embarrassed look. It was then told this mirror stand was truly an antique of 200 years old. Dad must have spent a lot of time and money just to get it, and truly, he knew his woman well. The mirror stand was double my height and as wide as my shoulder width. My mom was really excited, and she left the mirror in the living room as a precious decoration. About my mom, she's not actively working. She dedicated her time for home caring. She always tried her best to maintain her beauty. One day, I saw my mom standing in front of the mirror, her hands wrapped around the C-section scar delivering us to the world. She must be very sad and thinking about ways to improve that scar. However, the moment I saw my mom in the mirror, she was completely different. Let out a wide smile, her features becoming borderline inhuman. Startled, I called out to my mom, and she immediately turned around. Suddenly, the reflection in the mirror turned back to normal. I stared down on both my mom and her reflection in the mirror. Maybe it's all just a trick of the eyes. In the evening, my parents told me and my brother to wait in the TV room until they worked something else. Me and Beavis happily agreed. We brought snacks to eat and enjoyed our TV. That was a lot of fun that we forgot the passing of time. Until suddenly, I heard some crackle echoed from somewhere. It was scary to think back, but I thought at the time it was just the TV playing. When the show ended, my dad came back telling us to go to sleep. At night, the crackle I heard in the evening jolted me from my sleep. It stopped completely when I came back to my sense, so I had no idea whether it was a dream or not. The crackle came back with the mumbling from Beavis. I thought he's talking in his sleep. I let out a sigh of relief and immediately went back to sleep. In the evening, when my family was having a dinner, my mom prepared a great feast for the rest of us. Baked potatoes. My brother and I was asked about what happened at school. While I was pretty excited at my A grade in arts, Beavis was quite somber. Seeing his sunken mood, my parents asked what happened. Beavis stared at my dad and said that he saw a lady hugging him in his work office. My dad was stunned with his words, while my mom was really in shock. He put his hands on the boy's shoulders and asked him once again, looked deep in his eyes. "What kind of joke is that, Beavis?" My mom, in contrast, was furious at the mention of another woman, screaming at my dad. "You are a jerk. Kids don't lie, and you know it." After that, my dad dragged my mom for some serious talk, leaving us alone with a cold dinner. I turned over to Beavis, asking whether he's sure about what he saw. Beavis was sure, and went on to describe the lady he saw, with long waving hair and a white dress. The lady hugged my dad from behind while he's working. At the time, we didn't truly realize the scope of that, but we knew that for many days afterward, our family sunk deep in turmoil from my mom and dad constant arguments. My dad no longer slept at home anymore, but he now resided in the company. My mom, however, only dunked in alcohol and no longer cared for us like she used to. At dinner, it's always dried and blackened pieces of toast. She said that was the best she could do. Then it was her own dinner, a bottle of beer and an apple. I saw in her eyes nothing but tears and torment. Suddenly the light went off, and we were very frustrated. Normally it was my dad's role, yet dad wasn't there, so mom's gotta do it. After changing the light bulb, my mom smiled, then grabbed onto her half-eaten apple. The sound of broken glass echoed through the air, and when my mother turned around, we were shocked. In her hand was a broken light bulb, and within her mouth was blood and broken pieces of glass, covered in blood. My mom shakingly pulled out the broken glass pieces from her mouth, groaning in pain. Beavis was so scared that he cried out loud. I immediately pulled my mom to the bathroom for some first aid, and then went back on to console Beavis. That night, I hugged a sleeping Beavis at my side, fighting the churning empty stomach, while my mom would only stare at her mirror, motionless. Later in the morning, I called my dad and told him about what happened. He immediately returned, hugging us too and trying to make peace with Mom. After days of intense atmosphere, finally normalcy returned to us. In the weekends, I often went to my dad's workroom, where I had a large table for myself and could draw as much as I wanted with a bunch of colored crayons. That day, I noticed my dad with a plaster of Band-Aids on his finger, which he explained that it was an accident when dining with a customer. He said he's all right and proceeded to remove the Band-Aids due to it being very restrictive on typing over a keyboard. After some time, I asked my dad to bring some food in, and he said yes. When I came back with a snack bag, I dropped it on the floor, seeing my dad trying to pry out his entire fingernail from its socket. Successful at last, he brought up a bloody fingernail still attached with flesh and blood and cheerily talked to me. "This is one tough Band-Aid, kiddo. Took me a while to get rid of it." When I screamed in terror and ran away, that was when my dad realized what he'd done. Another day, when my brother and I just came back from school. We stopped dead on our tracks after we heard loud yelling from my parents' heated arguments. We dared not venture any further. The scene of the previous fight still haunted me. Then there was my mom's blood-curdling scream, followed quickly by a loud gunshot. Quickly covering Beavis's ears, I could see my brother shaking uncontrollably, eyes sunken down and his little fist shivering up. My dad walked out of the door, blood covered his clothes. Seeing us huddled there, my dad stopped, then laughed out loud, completely ignored us on his way out. Making our way inside, I saw my mom lying on the floor, blood pooling from under her lifeless body. I tried my best to cover Beavis's eyes so he didn't see anything. He squeezed my hands tight too, then cried out loud in panic. The mirror in front of us showed the two of us directly on its gaze. We were so pathetic, broken, and shattered. Behind our reflections came a woman in a white dress, just like what Beavis had described. I didn't see her face clearly, nor turn back around. I could only hug Beavis tightly and cry. The giggle came back, as I had heard it many times before. In an instant, the once happy family I had was now in pieces. My father was imprisoned, diagnosed with some mental issues, and passed away 2 years after being incarcerated. Beavis was in some serious post-traumatic disorder and must undergo serious treatment since. I was shuffled between relatives and foster homes, and finally the orphanage for 8 long years. Those were the lowest points of my life. But now, things seem to look up again. I just picked up Beavis from the psychiatric ward. They said he's doing all right. In the charity auction my fiance's company ran, I spot something familiar. The highest bid, it turned out, was the mirror stand my family once had. If you found the previous story interesting, make sure to click subscribe so you won't miss the next thrilling horror stories. Don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the stories above.